Welcome back. Today we are going to cover a lot of ground. So far, up to date, we've kind of talked about the presentation style of public speaking, keeping your nerves under control, using eloquent diction, speaking in clear, resonant, and dulcet tones. In some sense, making sure that our body is not a distraction, and in some ways, if we can even enhance that and use our bodies to help communicate. But today we're moving over into your content. How do you choose the topic? How do you organize your topic once you get it? And then how do you stay on topic as you speak? I'll give you some tricks of the trade there and go over some general concepts that are widely agreed on. You can see here that your next speech, if you're watching this, that hopefully you've just completed your introduction speech, so I've seen that from you, and hopefully we're moving on to the tribute speech. A tribute speech is to any person, place, or thing. So I've had people pay tribute to Abraham Lincoln or zombies, or even you can see that your example speech was a tribute to doodling by Sunny Brown in the TED website there. And there are a couple of reasons why I directed you to Sunny Brown. First of all, I think that she's a charming speaker despite her nervousness. You might have heard her breathlessness and sort of fumbly sensibility, but she's still charming. So I just want to remind you that that happens. You can still, have butterflies in your stomach and communicate effectively. It doesn't always mean the end of the world just because you're breathless. Keep powering through, keep working even though it may feel distracting. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. Sometimes some problem or some error in your performance can help people to feel closer to you or identify with you as a human being. So we're letting go of that idea of perfection and embracing our body and riding out the wave. So a week from today, if you're watching this on Monday, right after you get out of class, which I'm sure you all are, not procrastinating, then you will be performing your tribute speech. That is not required that you use media. You don't have to use a PowerPoint if you want to just stand up there and talk. And there's a reason for that. Some of you, your speech will be very heartfelt, and it'll be to someone who was very close to you and died tragically, or something heartfelt. You may not want to have a PowerPoint slide with that. It may be more genuine if it's just you talking to us openly. And then others of you will have tribute to something complicated like an inventor, and you'll need a lot of graphs and charts to explain the purposes of what they did. So you can use PowerPoint, but you don't have to. It needs to be 3 to 5 minutes, so just a little bit longer than last time. This is a famous Mark Twain quote: "If you want me to speak for an hour, I'm ready today. If you want me to speak for just a few minutes, it will take me a few weeks to prepare. If you want me to speak for an hour, I'm ready today. If you want me to speak for a few minutes, it'll take me weeks to prepare." So what does he mean by that? Being concise is difficult. Rambling on, telling us everything you know about something can be pretty simple. But being concise is much more difficult. Narrowing it down, finding exactly how to articulate what you want to say in a few sentences is more work than telling us exhaustively everything you know about it. And so I'll have some of you come to me and say, but I really want to talk about everything about football. And I'm going to tell you, well, you only have 3 minutes if you're going to pay tribute to football. You need to narrow it down. Don't tell us about the entire sport. Or if you do tell us about the entire sport, you're really going to have to dumb it down and make it very broad and very generalized. If I were you, I would just talk about, how a tribute to the founders of football or something like that. I don't even know enough about football to fake my way through it. But so this is when it comes to picking and choosing, cleaning out the junk drawer, as it were. Some of you, your brains look like this. You've just got stuff floating around everywhere and you can't keep it straight. So we really need to narrow it down. Think about putting it in the right drawer, categorizing and classifying, cleaning it up as it were, and creating a meal. I often compare some of your speeches that are unorganized to a buffet. You want to get a little meat, a little vegetable, a little starch maybe, and you have a meal put together. Some of you guys are piling food on top of food and it's no longer appetizing to us. It's no longer easy for us to digest. You need to create an appetizing conversation, walking us clearly through different points so that we are invited to join in. If you slop all that food on top of each other, pile that information up, then we get confused and it's no longer appealing to us. So one of the first rules is always to what's called signpost. Always signpost. Let us know the 3 reasons why doodling is good. Let us know, the 5 steps to baking cupcakes. Make it nice and simple for your audience. It's not like reading a book. When you're reading a book, we can be detailed and ornate and go into all sorts of exact reasons why, but when we're speaking in public, we need to keep it simple to a certain extent. Not as much complication needs to be there. So today I'm going to tell you the 5 steps to making cupcakes. I go through those 5 steps, and then at the end of the speech again I say, today we've talked about the 5 steps of cupcakes. I might reiterate those real quick and then conclude. You tell us what you're going to tell us, and then tell us what you told us. Always be super, super clear in categorizing your points and then telling us your method of organization, the way that you're thinking us through. So there are lots of good methods of organization. Patterns for dividing your speech. The first is the most common, and that is just sort of arbitrarily dividing your information. So my father is a Baptist preacher, and he wants to tell us the 3 P's of prayer: perseverance, and he comes up with 3 words that start with P, and that sort of just topical division, just dividing one speech into 3 different parts. That is topical division. So for my speech, I talked about Sally Field and how she is both has a personal life and a professional life. So I picked the 2 sides of Sally Field. She has a personal life and she has a professional life. That is a topical division. And then I picked a couple representative moments in Sally Field's life. So I might talk about her comedic career with Mrs. Doubtfire, and then her career in serious drama, and then I would talk about Steel Magnolias. Then I might talk about her personal life. Her personal life and how she represents feminists, and she also represents pacifists, people who are against war. So when we talk about topical division, I've picked some examples to support 2 claims, and 2 claims that are comparing apples to oranges. They're similar things, right? I'm not just talking about Sally Field, her personal life, and her hairstyle, right? I'm not comparing 2 dissimilar things. The topical sides of the coin still need to be comparing like subtopics, not just random things. Chronological. So when I lecture, I say usually because not necessarily today, but I usually walk you through page numbers in the book. I say, okay, now turn the page, let's go on to page 185. That would be a chronological because we're working from the beginning of the book to the back of the book. Chronological, if you pay tribute to Abraham Lincoln and you want to walk us through his political career, you might start when he got married and then talk about his role leading up to the presidency, and then maybe you conclude with his assassination. So walking us through chronologically the events of his life is a great way to pay tribute to him. Now, I would want to make sure, I think I say this next, you want to make sure if you're talking chronologically for your entire speech, that you are not just talking about cold hard facts, but you're bringing us into a persuasive conversation about why this person is worth paying tribute to. The goal of a tribute speech is to bring adoration or bring tribute to a worthy candidate. So if you just tell us that Abraham Lincoln was born on such and such day, he lived in such and such town, he married a woman, he pass such and such legislation with straight cold hard facts, and then you close, you've actually given me an informative speech. You haven't persuaded me to admire Abraham Lincoln. You've just told me things about him, cut and dry. So make sure that your speech is not just filled with facts, but also filled with emotion and pathos. We'll talk about later on in this semester the difference between logos and pathos, and getting our heartstrings tugged at. But for now, just remember not to make it too cut and dry. Now, when you do include logos, when you do include facts, you want to give me a works cited in MLA format. In MLA. So most of you have had an English teacher who required you to do MLA format. If you have any questions about MLA format, by all means, come visit me in my office and we'll take a second look at that. Next, we have spatially. Right? So if you were going to pay tribute to the human body and how we should all be amazed and stand in awe and wonder at how fascinating all of the intricacies of the human body are, then maybe you want to start up at our eyeballs and work down to our toes. That would be a spatial pattern for dividing the speech, because you are working from one location to another. Of course, if you were paying tribute to the great state of Tennessee, you might want to start in the east with Chattanooga, then tell us about Nashville, and then conclude with Memphis, right, and tell us about those three great cities. You would be a spatial organization pattern because you're working from east to west. Causal. Okay, now this will become even more meaningful when we talk about persuasive speeches, right? So we show first the effect. Maybe we show a little polar bear floating through the polar ice caps, and because of global warming, the polar bear is losing its natural environment. Well, that's the effect. And then we might go back to the cause of global warming. And that's just a way to categorize the speech, or you could do cause and then effect. Pro-con. Now this is always going to be an informative way of describing your speech. So when we get into the international project, the informative speech, you will have, assuming that by the time you hear this project you still have to do the international speech, sorry. The pro-con. Tell me the good things about it and then the bad things, right? So for example, while we're on the tundra, let's talk about drilling in Alaska. The U.S. has been questioning for many, many years whether or not we should drill in Alaska. Because the gas prices are so high, but at the same time we might need that oil reserve for later on. So there we can talk about the good things, we can talk about the bad things, and then leave the decision to the person making the decision. This is often the way that doctors have to approach patients, right? There are pros and cons to chemotherapy. There are pros and cons to amputating, right? And then let the person who has to make that big decision make it for themselves. Mnemonic or gimmick, right? Roy G. Biv, you might remember that. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's the lights in the color spectrum. These are really useful if you are going to use a generic topical organization pattern. I highly recommend that you create that in some way that's a gimmick or a mnemonic. especially when we get into things that can be sort of complicated, like your demonstration speech. You may want to give us the 5 steps to cupcake baking that all start with a B, right? Even if you have to kind of finagle it or, play with it a little bit, that might help us to remember it if we need to know off the top of our head. I mean, a great example of this is stop, drop, and roll, right? That's a nice catchphrase to represent a larger set of instructions. So it's memorable and it can go on to other patterns. Something can be both mnemonic and chronological. Stop, drop, and roll. So that would be chronological, but also gimmicky. Problem solution. This is seen by infomercials the world over, right? He just can't seem to get that blender to cut his carrots, and bring, the problem is solved because the juicer 5000, it'll juice your tie, it'll juice your hair. It can cause and solve any problem you need it to. This is also, like I said, a persuasive argument, showing a problem and then having a solution. This is probably not going to happen in your tribute speech, because if you spend a lot of your speech establishing a problem, then you're probably not going to you'll only talk about the person who solved that problem for half of the speech. But it may be important for us to know what that person fixed, the hole that person filled, how that person contributed to the world in general. So, for example, if you were going to pay tribute to the Wright brothers, you might talk about the problem with not being able to travel efficiently or trade with people except by ship. So hopefully that makes some sense there. We're talking about problem solution. Now, this is a whole big thing, and yeah. Need, plan, division. Some of you may have been telemarketers at some point and you got a script to kind of read or memorize, to kind of talk through with your client who you're trying to sell something to. There's a good chance that they would have had this need, plan, division. It's actually on page 155. I'm sorry, that page number is outdated there. So first you establish a deficiency in the present system, then you create your resolution, your proposal. So, for example, Proposition 8 in California, should homosexuals be able to be married? That would be proposition, a resolution, those sort of thesis statement, if you will. And then you're going to demonstrate how the proposal fits the need. This is always important when we get into persuasive, that you actually have to prove that if you buy this product, it will solve your problem, right? If you buy a juicer, you will automatically lose 50 pounds. And let me tell you why, right? That is the plan solving the need. And then fourthly, the fourfold, when we get to the fourth thing, you need to give people clear instructions on how to use your product. You need to tell people which gym to join, which local produce they can buy to juice, right? Not just leave them out there on their own to try to figure it out by themselves. You need to give them as little legwork to do as possible. But once again, need, plan, you can kind of forget about that until we get into the persuasive, and then we'll kind of drudge that back up. All right, so let's just take a second and look through these. Step aerobics. Which topical solution would you use? Sorry, I just said topical. Which one would you use? So if you're looking on page 149, it can give you a cheat sheet for these patterns of dividing your speech. If I were doing step aerobics, I would probably do chronological. I would tell people, I would walk people through a specific step aerobic plan. You step up, you step back down, you step over. The history of Coca-Cola might also be chronological. You're going to tell us about when it was founded, what some major events were. Self-defense for women. You might talk about the pro-con maybe of self-defense. There are how many times has self-defense actually protected a woman, something like that. 50 Cent, if you're paying tribute to the rapper 50 Cent, same thing. You might say the pros or the cons. You might just walk us chronologically through his life. The rating of movies, right? Maybe I'd start by defining what G, then PG, then PG-13, then X, and then origami. Maybe I might teach you how to fold origami. Once again, that's chronological. Take you through the steps. Treatment of insomnia, that might be topical. I might first talk about how you could eat, and then maybe talk about other lifestyle choices such as exercise and getting on a schedule. Shopping addiction, that might be topical. I might just give you some 10 tricks to stop shopping addiction. Cut up your credit card, find other useful ways to use your energy. Cloning, I might talk about both the pros and the cons of cloning, how cloning could solve some of our medical problems, but how it also might be coming out of control or something. So hopefully this has kind of helped you to understand that whatever topic you choose, it's specific to what kind of organization pattern you need. For most of you, for the first speech, you'll use some combination of chronological and topical. You might give us a quick overview of defining who they are and what they've done chronologically, some big events in their life, and then you might move on to topical division and telling us about 3 things about this person that we should admire. So now we're talking about how to structure your speech. How should you actually divide what to say first, what to say second? And the first thing that you always need to start every sentence practically with a signpost. So if you say the 4 reasons why we should admire Sally Field, so you might say, first, you should admire Sally Field because she is, and then go on example, maybe a second example. So my first point is, you should admire Sally Field because. So I go back, once again, I state it, I say what I'm going to say, tell them what you told them, wait, sorry. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So then you should state your thesis. It should be concise. It should fit on a bumper sticker. This should not be a big, long, confusing thing, right? Sally Fields, let me persuade you that Sally Field has an admirable professional life, right? Nice and simple. You should admire, what should I admire? 3 words, Sally Field's professional life, right? Just very simple. You should admire her professional life. I didn't say you should admire her family skills and get into a big long, I just, nice and simple, her professional life. And then you'll go about supporting your resolution. When I say state, that means your resolution, your proposition, your contention, right? Whatever that claim you're making, you have to go then and argue it. You have to support it. You can't just say, obviously, of course, we all agree. No, some of you guys might not like Sally Field. You might think she's a hack. You might think she's an overactor. You might think that she's a silly feminist and her ideas are liberal and not thoughtful. I have to persuade you that Sally Field is a strong woman, that she's aged gracefully, that she has won several Academy Awards because she deserved them. I have to argue my points and try to persuade you to like her. And I have to give you evidence there. I can't just say, you should like her because I like her. You should like her because she is good. I need to give facts. I need to give scientific evidence. And this is something that a lot of you might not be used to, and that is scholarship in general. Being a scholar. In a scholarly world, in the university setting, you need to give scientific evidence. You don't need just to say, because I told you so, right? Or because I like it that way, right? You need to give cold hard evidence. And this is a good time to show those 30-second videos where you help us define, say you're paying tribute to dance, you might want to show me the 30-second video and teach me how to Dougie, right? And then that definition has helped me then have a keystone point from which to understand the rest of you. If you're paying tribute to a celebrity, please get a picture of that celebrity up, because we may not remember who Jay-Z is. He may be muddled in our mind with another musician that we can't seem to picture in our head. So your tribute speech, by the way, can be to an entertainer if you want it to be. And then last, you'll go back and summarize. So this is what I was saying choppedly, not clearly, that you should restate what you said, right? The conclusion should have no new information. No new information. So if I got through Sally Field's entire thing and then I come to the conclusion and I say, oh, and she was on Broadway. No, 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 no. I need to have all of that information before. I need to wrap it up and say, okay, Sally Field, you should like her because she took an anti-war stance in a very unpopular time. She stands up for women's rights and ages gracefully, talking about important women's health issues. She has mastered both comedic and serious drama. And for all these reasons, you should pay tribute to Sally Field. You see how I did that? I just re-summarized some of my main points rather than bringing up new information. In your summary or conclusion, you should not bring up information. So if someone asks you to give a speech on the spot, this 4 S's is a good way for you to outline it real quick, right? And ask yourself, what am I stating, then how am I supporting it, and then how am I summarizing it? And then if you have 3 main things to talk about, then first signpost it, state it, support it, and summarize it. Point number 2, signpost it, state it, support it, and summarize it. Point number 3, signpost, state, support, and summarize it, and then give us a conclusion. So it's a nice quick formula to tell a speech. Transitions. So this can be a sticky business for some of you who already have existing grammar problems. And this is actually 162. I am sorry that some of these page numbers are off. It's not 167, it's 162. So complementary. So if I'm talking about how both Sally Field's personal and professional life bring honor or credit or bring tribute to her name, then I might say, as I transition from her personal life into her professional life, I might say, in the same way, or also, or in addition to. These sort of transitions agree that the two are both the same. Causal. So if I might talk about after Sally Field was given opportunities in serious drama, then she was giving, because she proved herself as a serious dramatic actress, she was given opportunities in blockbuster comedic films. And so I might say, because she proved herself in Steel Magnolias, then she was offered a part in Mrs. Doubtfire, which I don't know if that's true. I'm just trying to give you an example of causal reactions. Because, consequently, therefore. Don't say therefore if there's not a foundation in which a therefore is needed. Don't say she has a good professional life, therefore she has a good personal life, because those things are mutually exclusive, right? Somebody can be very successful in business and not successful in personal, or they can be very successful personally and not successful professionally. So for me to transition causally and act like those things are related is incorrect. It needs to be because of that, this. Because this exists, therefore that exists. What is there, therefore? It needs to be there for a reason. Contrasting transitions, right? So if Sally Field had actually had a very unsuccessful personal life, I might talk about her relationship with Burt Reynolds. I might talk about her abuse as a child, right? So I might start with saying Sally Field had a hard childhood. However, she overcame it in adulthood. Sally Field had a hard and unsuccessful childhood. In spite of that, she was able to come about great fame in her adults. So contrasting is talking about the differences between two things. Chronological should be pretty easy: first, second, third, before, later, after, that kind of thing. Okay, so we're changing gears completely and talking about how do I pick a topic. How do I pick a topic? First thing you need to think about is that first bullet point. Is it informative or persuasive? For your tribute speech, you need to pick somebody who you can be persuasive about, who you can tell us to like, who you personally like. Don't pick someone who you don't admire, right? And that'll come through in your speech. Don't pay tribute to your mom if you and your mom are in a rocky place right now, because it's going to come through. You're going to say, well, you know, and this happens to me. I grew up around a lot of funerals, you know, and people would stand up and say, well, she sure was an alcoholic, but, right? And we don't need to have topics like that come up. If they were, you know, and that's part of the reason I had you watch the Michael Jackson, because I think that Reverend Al Sharpton did a great job of paying tribute, and maybe he was a little generous. I mean, I think Michael Jackson was odd, and when he says, you know, Michael Jackson wasn't odd, I think that's a little bit of overstatement, personally, from my perspective, but you need to pick someone that is persuasive, that you can be persuasive about. And so make sure that your topic fits the assignment, right? When we're talking about international speakers, you don't get to talk about Abraham Lincoln because he's not talking about international, right? He mostly spoke about the Civil War. When he says 70 years ago, that's not necessarily an international issue. That's a America issue. So make sure that your topic fits the assignment. So when you're brainstorming, I'm just going to ask you to sit down and write as many things as you know about that. So if you pay tribute to your mama, sit down and tell me every great thing about your mom. And then, you know, if you need to just write for a minute, blah, 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 my foot itches, then just keep writing, because once that pen gets picked up, you might have a stop in creative flow. Keep an open mind, right? You might put down, my mom bakes really great cookies, and then you go back through and you realize maybe that's not an important point about, you know, maybe that's not substantial enough reason to like my mama, so you mark through that. But in the brainstorming process, there are no wrong answers, and we talk about this a lot in communal writing, how we have to be open-minded and say yes and. Alright, so let's take just a second to look at speech topics. If you are at the Motlo website, then you go to quick links down to library, and then we're going to go to find database descriptions right here on the left. Now we're going to scroll down to we could go to general one file, but for our purposes today, I think I'm going to go to opposing viewpoints in context. General one file is a great overall source. So for example, if you're going to pay your tribute to an inventor or something, then that might be a great place to start. But the reason why I went to opposing viewpoints in context is your big speech, your persuasive speech, is usually the one that I had the most trouble with people coming up with a topic for. So if you look down here, it gives you an entire list of issues, and the best part is it tells you both viewpoints. It tells you both the good and the bad and the ugly. Right, so fracking. This is an issue about whether or not we should drill underneath the earth, and the natural resource, the natural gas companies really think this is a good idea, and a lot of the green people, the people who are interested in conservation, think that fracking is a really bad idea. So take a minute, read a couple articles about fracking, and decide for yourself. Choose a side, and now you're ready to give your persuasive speech. Right, so we could talk about bullying, we could talk about war, medical marijuana, lots of great issues here for you to talk about. So once again, I just went to library, article database, opposing viewpoints, and context. Let me go to general one file real quick, just so you can see how great this resource is to General One file is part of the Gale group. And you can think of databases as file cabinets full of credible sources. File cabinets full of credible sources. So say I want to pay my tribute speech to Hillary Clinton. All right, you can see we've got 1,553 newspaper articles dedicated to Hillary Clinton. So I might want to narrow it down a little bit. Hillary Rodham Clinton, maybe that will help me. Only 67 now, right? We're down to 67. And maybe I know these academic journals are often going to be over your head. Let's be honest. These are written by professors for other professors or experts in a field and research for other researchers. So I say that as sort of a preface. It might be over your head if it's something you're really already good at, and you've had your hand at it and you think, okay, I'm pretty good at this, then academic journal is a wonderful source. This is the prime rib of research sources. But most of you will need to go to more generalized newspaper sources telling us her biography or her life events. You'll want to go just to news sources. Oh, you can even see when she was in the cover story. The Economist is a wonderful newspaper that's really got both sides. You can even see what the most recent things about any current issue are, which is very important that we're up to date. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about how to research well. I just wanted to get you into the library website and seeing that those databases are very useful in finding topics if you need to just go in there and search around a little bit. But I'm going to encourage you not to just choose random topics. Really take a moment to search your heart. Who do you truly find worth giving praise to? I would rather hear a heartfelt speech about your fan, you as a genuine fan of Jay-Z, than a fake speech about Abraham Lincoln. I would rather you pay true tribute to someone you actually enjoy rather than an obligatory. Remember, this class is about how to research and how to give a speech. It's not necessarily academic scholarship and research. So, I don't put limits on what topics you do. That's your right as a student to kind of use that wiggle room to have fun in the class. Like I said, if you want to pay tributes to zombies, then that's a great place. And it's worth saying, too, in this tribute speech that sources are not required. You can see on mine that I have hard facts about Sally Field when she was born and when she died. So I have citations in MLA format, but you may be talking about your mother, in which case you don't have you didn't open up any books to hear about your mother. You just talked to your mom. So you don't need to have a work cited there if it is something like that. All right, so once again, are you interested in it? Is your audience interested? I have some students who have fascinating hobbies, such as aerodynamics, and they want to pay tribute to the Wright brothers, as I said. But you really have to make sure that you make that interesting for your audience, because a lot of people want to know, so what? How do the Wright brothers have anything to do with my life? How did they help me at all? What is my self-interest? So make sure that you're coming back to us and appealing to us as an audience. But if you are truly enthusiastic, that'll come through as well. Focusing. Oh goodness, if I could just drill this into your head this early in the semester, we will all come out with A's. Unfortunately, it's a really hard topic, and one of the reasons that Chapter 9 is so important. Am I being too broad, or am I being too narrow? Right? Am I talking about everything that ever happened to Sally Field? Well, then maybe I'm being too broad. Maybe my speech is going to be too long. Maybe I need to just focus on Sally Field, the early years. If you look at a Steve Martin biography like Born Standing Up, he's only talking about the time when he was a stand-up comedian. He didn't choose to tackle his childhood or his marriages. He just spoke about the time when he was a stand-up comic. So maybe that's a good way for you to pay tribute to someone. Maybe you just want to talk about your mother when she was working her way through grad school, right? That might be an interesting topic, just focusing it down. And then the other question for you is, do you really get it? Have you really processed it? Does it make sense to you? I can't tell you how many students I have come up and talk about an issue and they can't pronounce the medical terminology, or they don't even fully understand it themselves, and so they're saying things that are not necessarily true. Please make sure you've done your homework and researched your topic enough to speak to us eloquently about it, that you're not just speaking in generalities or even lying, because that can happen. I had a hilarious student talk about the Illuminati conspiracy, but I had to take points off because he had entirely speculative sources, right? According to this YouTube video one time, according to this fictional account in a book, according to how many people are wearing black and white in a hip-hop video. Well, those aren't credible sources. And so if an expert hasn't said it, or if you don't have it from the horse's mouth, then it might not be credible argument. So before you, and I'm not saying you can never talk about conspiracy theories. I've heard some great conspiracy theory tributes about Area 51, is that right? You know, and the things that we do truly know in government documents, right? Government documents are a great source, a great credible source. And then whatever theory on top of that, it's made clear. This is just speculation, but it's interesting speculation. Here we go. Let's talk about that airport, or let's talk about this picture. And so always make clear how credible a source is. We don't want to play secondhand news. We don't want to say, according to, you know, my cousin Vinny, or Fat Vanessa, as he said. Yes, sources are not required for tribute. We've already covered that. But if you do have a source, no Wikipedia. Wikipedia is still not a credible source in scholastic view. And then also you must create an outline that on the bottom of the outline, you can either put it on the next page or on the same page. You need to list those sources that you used. And because you're not required to use any sources, I don't give you a certain number of sources. You don't have to have 3 sources. You can have only 1 source if you only needed to fact check 1 piece of data. So hopefully that's clear. Okay, so for your purpose, you need to decide, what do I want from my audience? Do I want them to laugh? Do I want them to learn? Or do I want them to change their mind? For this tribute speech, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, your purpose is to persuade them to pay tribute. You're persuading them to pay tribute. And you always have to remember that, because if you, like I said, go off on lots and lots of lists of facts, that's not usually as persuasive, right? So you need to make sure that all of your content, don't let anything come out of your mouth that does not serve that purpose of either persuading, informing, or entertaining. Now, once you've decided in general that you want to persuade someone to pay tribute, you need to go a little bit more specific . And list your specific topic. And then, however, remember I said that you're going to narrow that topic. So my specific purpose is to pay tribute to Sally Field personally and professionally. Personally and professionally. You know, there may be some aspects of Sally Field's life we don't need to pay tribute to. So I'm just going to focus on those things that are worthy of paying tribute to. So if you were going to talk about an athlete, you might say, I'd like to pay tribute to O.J. Simpson, right? If you're going to pay tribute to O.J. Simpson, you might not want to bring up those murder charges. You might just want to talk about his athletic career and maybe his acting career if you're feeling generous, but we're not going to pay tribute to his relationship with his wife when she died, right? Whether it was he was guilty or not, we're not going to bring up that side. So be specific in your specific purpose. Limit your goal of what you want to persuade them on or inform them on, right? We're not going to tell them every single thing that ever happened to Sally Field. We're just going to talk about a few examples from her personal and professional life. All right, now we get into a a phrase that my students get so frustrated with, and that is the concept of a thesis. And let me begin by telling you to throw out what you previously conceived a thesis to be, because in English class, a thesis is often long, it's got lots of points to it, whereas a thesis in public speaking is a synopsis of your entire message. And usually your thesis sentence is going to preview your points. So once again, today I want to talk about Sally Field personally and professionally. And then first I talk about her personal life as I ordered it in my thesis. Now, why do I have bumper stickers there? Because a thesis in public speaking needs to be super simple. It needs to be clear. It does not need to be long and involved, right? So, but you do want to itemize as you go what kind of organization pattern you've got. So the example they give you here in your book is Andy Goldsworthy sculpts wood, ice, and leaves into intricate works in their natural setting. So then obviously he would go through and tell us first about Andy Goldsworthy's wood sculpture, then about his ice sculpture, then about his leaf sculpture. And that helps to give us an organization method from the top. We know you've given us a roadmap of where to go with it. So why do we even bother to create an outline? Remember I said you have to type up an outline and turn it into me as you walk up to the front of the classroom. Why do I care so much about these outlines? Every speech you give from here on out will require an outline. And the first thing that it does is it makes sure that you've thought about your topic enough to distill it, like Mark Twain talked about. You've made it simple enough to share it with us within the 3 to 5 minute time period. Then it also helps me to understand how your evidence supports your claim. So, for example, I might say, Sally Field is willing to do these Boniva commercials. She is a representative of, a counterculture to our ageist society. Well, if I had never said anything about feminine issues in that, but it's under that in my outline, it helps me to understand that you see that ageist as a subsect of the feminist movement. So understanding how your supporting ideas affect and clarify your message. But remember, I don't want to put in items that don't support my claims. I don't want to talk about her divorce from Burt Reynolds if it doesn't support the idea that she was successful professionally and personally. So I want to check that you have enough evidence to support your claim. If I said Sally Field is a good person, trust me, and moved on to her professional life, then that's not enough evidence to support my claim. I haven't made a clear argument that would support my resolution. I need to create some sort of chronological order, which we already talked about. First of all, I need at least 2 main points from you. At least 2 main points, and then from there 2 to 5 subpoints. No more than 5. Don't give me the 7 steps to blah 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 in this particular exercise. When we get into the demonstration speech, I'll add a little bit more leniency. If you want to give me 10 steps, then maybe we can digest that. But if you get more than a handful, if you get more than 5, sometimes you can really lose your audience. So you can throw in a comment here and there. Remember, we leave room for extemporaneous speech. We leave room for you being able to kind of wake up the audience a little bit, but we don't ever want to talk for extended periods of time chasing that rabbit hole, talking on a tangent. We want to try to stay to our outline. And a lot of you who carry a note card to the front of the class, I suggest you write your outline on there. No, you cannot take your written typed outline that you hand to me to the front of the class, because remember, that is a piece of paper, and you can't have a paper, you can only have a note card. If you have a 1, you must have a 2. Now this is a very important concept. If you have a pie and you cut the pie is automatically 2 pieces. All right? If you cut a piece of pie, if you cut a pie down the middle, it is automatically 2 pieces. And so an outline is a way of dividing your content, and you always must divide it into 2, right? If you're going to talk about just Sally Field's professional work, then the title of the speech needs to be Sally Field's professional work. And then I need to come up with 2 subsects and 2 more subsects. You must use numbers, Roman numerals, or letters. No wing-ding, smiley faces, heart shapes. Stick with the traditional word outline format. And you must indent, right? And they all need to line up as they indent, which you can see from the example I gave you. Also, you only need to spend the time that is proportional to where it is on your outline. So if you're just giving an example, that example should only take a minute. You shouldn't spend the entire first half of your speech talking about Sally Field's childhood if you mean to talk about her professional and her personal life. That would be a disproportionate amount just on her personal life. One of these things is not like the other one. Good. So we want to make sure, like I said, personal and professional are two sides of the same coin. And we also want to make sure that those two words are the same part of speech, that they're the same verb tense. So we want to compare apples to oranges. We want to compare walking to running. We don't want to compare running to apples, right? It needs to be in the present tense. Right? It needs to be in the present tense. And if you're talking about Abraham Lincoln, everything needs to be in the past tense. He was a good president. He was a good speaker, right? Just keep it consistent. And then you need to use those transitions we talked about earlier. So this is incorrect. Both talking and listening are important. I don't need to use one a prepositional phrase and the other an ing. We are not for war but peace. Right? You could say we are not for war but for peace. We've got two prepositional phrases and we're comparing them both similarly. All right, so I feel like I've blown through that. Please go back and watch Sunny Brown's example of a tribute speech. Please go back and watch Al Sharpton's example of a tribute speech. And I look forward to hearing your tribute speeches on Monday. Thank you for listening.